Let me ask you something that might sound simple at first, but becomes surprisingly difficult to answer once you really stop and think about it. Have you ever loaded into a match of Battlefield 1, started moving forward, and then, almost without realizing it, slowed down? Not because you were under fire or checking your surroundings, but because the scene in front of you just felt unusually coherent. Like everything belonged exactly where it was supposed to be.
We have lost objective Duff.
And then, almost immediately after that moment, you remember that Battlefield 1 came out in 2016. And the question shifts from why does this still look good to something much more uncomfortable for modern games, which is why does this still look better than so many titles released years later? Hello everyone, my name is Basileus. Happy New Year, hope you're doing great. This is the third episode of our series regarding Battlefield's use of photogrammetry and how this ties up to the modern games in terms of performance. I hope you're finding the series useful until now. For what it is worth, I have received some feedback to heart. I have rewritten my scenarios to make them more fluid. At least this is the feedback that I have received, that they were not as fluid until now. Hope you like the new setup, and let's continue with the third episode of our series. So one of the most important reasons for this, why Battlefield 1 still look so good and even better, even better than many modern games, as a matter of fact. And also one of the least flashy reasons is that Battlefield 1 is grounded, very literally as a matter of fact, in the real world. That means that a significant portion of the environments you see, including the terrain, the rocks, the ground surfaces, the rubble, and the various environmental props, were captured using photogrammetry, meaning they weren't simply imagined or approximated by artists, but scanned from real locations and then carefully adapted to work within the Frostbite engine. And the reason that matters so much is because reality doesn't age the way technology does. A rock doesn't suddenly look outdated because rendering techniques improve, and mud doesn't stop feeling believable because a new lighting model comes along. And so, by anchoring so much of its visual identity in physical truth rather than contemporary trends, Battlefield 1 essentially insulated itself from time in a way most games never managed to do.
We are losing objective butter.
What is interesting though is that this realism doesn't come from overwhelming you with detail at every possible moment. If you stop and really examine a Battlefield 1 scene, you'll notice that it's surprisingly restrained, with detail placed deliberately in areas your eyes naturally focus on, rather than being evenly spread across every surface in the frame. And this is where Battlefield 1 quietly diverges from many modern games, which often equate realism with sheer visual density and end up filling every surface with layered materials, decals, foliage, and micro detail, all competing for your attention at the same time and often making it harder, not easier, to read what's actually happening on the screen. And you can see, as a matter of fact, the consequences of that approach very clearly if you think back to Battlefield 5, where one of the most common complaints at launch, and for quite a long time afterwards, was that enemies were simply hard to see. Not because the game lacked detail, but because there was too much of it layered on top of itself. And we can even see that the same problem is coming back again with Battlefield 6, with the same complaints being heard again. Battlefield 1 avoids that problem by being more selective. And that selectiveness creates clarity, which is a big part of why the game still feels cinematic rather than cluttered, even during its most chaotic moments. That clarity becomes even more important once we start talking about lighting, which is arguably the biggest technical difference between Battlefield 1 and most modern games. And this is because Battlefield 1 relies heavily on baked global illumination, meaning that most of the lighting in the environment was calculated offline ahead of time and then stored so it could be displayed consistently during gameplay. The result of this approach is lighting that is stable, lighting that is predictable, and lighting that is largely free from the noise, the flickering, and the subtle instability that often comes with real-time lighting solutions, especially when those systems are being pushed hard. And this matters even more than people often realize, because biologically, our brains are extremely sensitive to lighting inconsistencies. When light behaves the way we expect it to, everything else in the scene immediately feels more believable, even if we can't consciously explain why. Modern engines, however, have largely moved away from this philosophy in favor of real-time global illumination, where lighting is constantly recalculated as the world changes, reacting dynamically to time of day, to destruction, to weather, to player interaction, you name it. That flexibility in and of itself is powerful, but it comes with significant trade-offs. Real-time lighting, you see, is expensive. It is inherently noisy, and it is often unstable, which is why modern games rely so heavily on temporal reconstruction, on aggressive filtering, and on upscaling techniques just to keep the image coherent from frame to frame. AMD, as a matter of fact, unintentionally illustrated this very clearly during the recent presentation of FSR Redstone, where they showed raw upscaled frames before the AI model had a chance to clean them up. And you could see just how noisy and fragmented the image actually is at the moment it's created, before temporal data and reconstruction are applied. That process works, make no mistake. And, to be perfectly honest, it works impressively well. But it also reveals an important truth about modern rendering pipelines. A significant portion of what we see on screen is no longer the direct result of rendering, but the result of correction. The end result is a visual experience that can look impressive in still images, but often feels softer, less consistent, and less readable once everything is in motion. This is where Unreal Engine 5's Lumen fits into the picture, not as a failure, but as a clear expression of a different design philosophy. Lumen is built to simulate global illumination in real time, allowing light to bounce, to react, and to update dynamically as environments change, which makes it incredibly powerful for large reactive worlds. But when you compare Lumen-based games to Battlefield 1, what you're really comparing isn't raw visual quality, but a fundamental trade-off between certainty and flexibility. Battlefield 1, you see, commits to a specific lighting solution and perfects it, while modern engines prioritize adaptability, even if that means sacrificing consistency and clarity. That philosophical difference is also why Battlefield 1 runs so well on modern hardware. Because it doesn't need to constantly recalculate lighting, modern GPUs have enormous headroom, which directly translates into stable frame rates, smooth motion, and the lack of visual artifacts. And when you contrast that with how much reconstruction and correction is required in modern pipelines, like the raw, noisy frames AMD showed before FSR Redstone's AI cleans them up, it becomes clear why stability itself has become a form of visual quality. Battlefield 1 didn't age well because it used older technology. It aged well because it made deliberate choices about what needed to be simulated in real time and what didn't. And as we move forward in the series, that distinction becomes increasingly important, because once you understand it, modern performance issues and the controversy around systems like Lumen start to make a lot of sense. So next time, we'll look closely at Battlefield 5 and at the moment DICE and the industry as a whole fully committed to dynamic systems for better and for worse. I am Basileus. I hope you learned something today. I hope you found this informational. I hope you found this entertaining. I hope you enjoyed the footage in the background. If so, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps immensely. It also sends me the message that you like the content that I'm creating, and it gives me a push to continue making it. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.